After drought of the river. Elderly couple find underground passage. But what was inside? Harold had never seen the Catawba River so dry in his 72 years of life. The water that used to run strong between the stones now barely formed small scattered puddles, exposing the banks that had remained hidden for decades. It was Dorothy who spotted the strange opening in the riverbank first, something that looked like an entrance built with ancient stones, half hidden by the dry vegetation the drought had revealed. "Harold, come see this," she called, holding firmly onto her red suitcase that she had been carrying for 3 days since they left home. The old man approached slowly, feeling the weight of the brown suitcase in his calloused hand. At 75, each step required more effort than before, but the curiosity in his wife's voice motivated him to quicken his pace. "What did you find, Dorothy?" "It looks like a door or an entrance. Look at these stones. Look at... This isn't natural. This was made by someone." Harold observed the structure carefully. There really was something different about that place. The stones were arranged in an organized way, forming an opening that went down into the earth. The wood that sealed the entrance was old and half rotten, but still resisted time. "Should we mess with this?" asked Dorothy, but there was a curiosity in her eyes that Harold knew well. "After all we've been through these last few days, what else could happen?" he replied, setting the suitcase on the ground. The two had been on the run for 3 days, not from bandits or any physical danger, but from a situation that had become unbearable in their own home. Their youngest son, Stephen, had decided to sell the family farm without consulting his parents, claiming they were no longer able to take care of the property alone. The argument had been terrible. Harsh words were said. Wounding hearts that already carried other grievances accumulated over the years. Dorothy cried as she hadn't cried in a long time, and Harold felt an anger he didn't know still existed inside him. "If that's how you think, then we're leaving," he had said, grabbing a suitcase and filling it with some clothes and the few important documents they kept. Dorothy followed without question. 48 years of marriage had created a complicity that made many words unnecessary. If Harold thought it was time to leave, she trusted his decision. Now, 3 days later, walking along the dry riverbanks toward the neighboring town where they planned to stay at a distant cousin's house, they came upon this unusual discovery. "Let's take a look," said Dorothy, approaching the entrance. The wood gave way easily when Harold pushed it. A smell of damp earth and thyme rose from the dark hole, but it wasn't unpleasant. It seemed more like an old cellar than anything dangerous. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "There's light coming from down there," observed Dorothy, leaning over the opening. Harold took the cell phone his grandson had insisted he buy and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light revealed a stone staircase that descended a few meters before turning a corner. "This looks very old, Dorothy. Who could have built this here?" "I don't know, but something is calling me to go down. It's like I've been here before." Harold looked at his wife in surprise. Dorothy had never mentioned knowing that region beyond the sporadic visits they made to the town. They had lived their whole lives on the farm, 40 kilometers away. "What do you mean, you've been here before?" "I can't explain it well. It's a strange feeling, like a very old memory, almost a dream." The two remained silent for a few moments, looking at the mysterious entrance. The midday sun was strong, and the shadow provided by the opening was a welcome relief. "Let's go down just a little to see what's there," suggested Harold. "If it's dangerous, we'll come back." Dorothy nodded. They left their suitcases outside and began to carefully descend the stone steps. The temperature dropped with each step, bringing a coolness that contrasted with the dry heat outside. After descending about 15 steps, the staircase curved to the right and opened into a small room. The light from Harold's phone revealed stone walls and, to their surprise, some old furniture still in relatively good condition. "Good heavens," murmured Dorothy. "This is an underground house." There was a dark wooden table, 2 simple chairs, some shelves on the wall, and in the farthest corner, something that looked like a stone bed covered with fabrics that, despite the passage of time, still retained some color. "Who lived here?" asked Harold, moving the light over the objects. "And when?" "This must be years, maybe decades old." Dorothy approached one of the shelves and saw some objects that made her stop. There was a cloth doll, very simple but made with care. Next to it, a small cup and some pieces of paper yellowed by time. "Harold, come see this." She carefully picked up one of the papers. The ink was faded, but some words were still legible. It was a child's handwriting from someone who was learning to write. "My name is," read Dorothy, but the continuation was illegible. "I am 7 years old, and I live down here because—" The rest of the sentence had been erased by time. "A child lived here," said Harold, feeling a tightness in his chest. "It seems so, but why would a child live in a place like this?" Dorothy continued to handle the objects, while Harold examined the rest of the room. At the back, there was a passage leading to another space larger than the first. "Dorothy, there's more here, come see." The second room was more spacious and better furnished. There was a wooden armchair with cushions that, despite the years, still looked comfortable, a larger table with drawers, and on the walls some framed photographs. "Photographs," said Dorothy, moving closer. "Maybe they'll tell us who lived here." The photos were yellowed, and some were blurred by moisture, but it was still possible to make out faces and figures. The first showed a family, a man, a woman, and a little girl, all dressed in clothes that seemed to be from the 1960s or 1970s. "Look at the date on the back," said Harold, turning the frame. 1972. Bennett family, Helen, Walter, and little Marilyn. Dorothy felt something strange upon reading those names, a sense of familiarity she couldn't explain. "Bennett. Why does that name seem familiar to me?" "It could be a coincidence. It's a common surname." But Dorothy wasn't convinced. She picked up another photo, this one showing only the girl, a little older, perhaps 8 or 9. The child was holding the same cloth doll they had found in the other room. "Harold, this girl, she reminds me of someone." "Who?" "I can't say. It's as if I've seen this face before, but that's impossible. The photo is over 50 years old." Harold came closer to observe the image better. There really was something familiar about the girl's face, but he couldn't identify what it was either. "Let's look for more things. Maybe we'll find some explanation for all this." They continued exploring the space. In one of the table drawers, Dorothy found more papers, these better preserved and in an adult's handwriting. "They're letters," she said, "letters written to someone named Marilyn, the girl in the photos." "It must be. Listen to this. My dear Marilyn, I hope you are well in your hiding place. Mum and Dad are doing everything they can to resolve the situation. Soon, very soon, you'll be able to come home and play in the backyard like before. Be a brave girl and take good care of the Dolly Helen we made for you." Dorothy stopped reading, feeling a lump in her throat. A hiding place? She was hiding down here. From what? From whom? "I don't know, but this is making me sad. A little child living alone down here." Harold sat in the old armchair, feeling the weight of the discovery. They had found much more than a simple underground passage. They had found the story of a family, of a child who had to hide from the world for some reason. "Let's keep reading the letters, Faye. Maybe we'll find out what happened to them." Dorothy picked up another letter with a later date. "Marilyn, my dear daughter, it's been 6 months since you went to the safe place. Daddy got a job in another city, and soon we will come to get you. The situation at home still isn't good, but we have hope that everything will work out. Keep being obedient and doing your homework. We left more food in the secret pantry." 6 months, said Harold. "This child was alone here for 6 months." "It seems so. And look, there's a pantry. It must be around here somewhere." They searched and found at the back of the second room a smaller opening that led to a third space, this one clearly used as a pantry. There were shelves with empty jars, old cans, and even some sealed non-perishable foods. "The parents really did leave food here for her," observed Dorothy. "But why couldn't this child stay at home like any other?" "In the 1970s, reflected Harold, "that could have been the time of the dictatorship. Many families had political problems back then. You think the parents were being pursued? It's possible. Maybe they hid their daughter here to protect her." Dorothy found more letters, these with increasingly spaced-out dates and a tone growing more desperate. "Marilyn, it's been a year. Mum is very worried because we can't visit you often anymore. Daddy says we have to move far away, but we don't want to leave you. We're trying to find a way to take you with us without anyone finding out. Stay strong, my girl." "A year alone?" said Harold, feeling a tightness in his heart. "That's terrible. A 7 or 8-year-old child living alone in this hole." Dorothy kept reading, but her hands began to tremble slightly. There was something in those letters that was affecting her in a way she couldn't understand. "Marilyn, forgive us. We had to leave in a hurry. We left enough money and food for a few months. We promise we will come back for you as soon as we can. Be brave, daughter. Mom loves you very much and thinks of you every day." That was the last letter from the mother. Dorothy looked for more correspondence, but only found some papers written by the child herself. The handwriting was more developed, showing she had grown up in that place. "I am 10 years old today. It's been 3 years since Mom and Dad left. The food they left ran out a long time ago, but I learned to go up at night to get fruit and drink water from the river. During the day I stay down here because there are people looking." 3 years, murmured Harold. She was here for 3 years. "And listen to this. Sometimes I go up just at dawn and see men in uniforms walking around the area. They are looking for someone. I think they are looking for me. That's why I can't go out." Dorothy stopped reading. Her hands were shaking, and she felt a growing anguish in her chest. "What is it, Dorothy? You look pale." "I don't know, Harold. This story is making me feel sick. It's as if I know this girl. You can't know her. That was 50 years ago. You were only—" Harold stopped mid-sentence. He did a quick calculation in his head. If that had happened in 1972, Dorothy would have been exactly 7 years old at the time. "Dorothy, how old were you in 1972? 7. Why do you—" She stopped, looking at him with a startled expression. "Harold, you're not thinking that— What was your mother's maiden name?" "Bennett. Helen Bennett. But that doesn't mean—" The two looked at each other in silence. The possibility that had arisen between them was absurd, but the coincidences were too many to ignore. "Dorothy, where did you live when you were 7? I don't remember well. Mom always said we moved a lot when I was little. She said Dad had problems at work and that we needed to move constantly. And do you remember living anywhere like this?" Dorothy looked around the underground space. Now that she paid attention, there was something familiar about those stone walls, that cool temperature, the arrangement of the furniture. I have some very confused memories from my childhood, like fragments of dreams. I remember being alone in a dark place, but a safe one. I remember a cloth doll that I carried everywhere." She looked at the doll that was still on the shelf. "Harold, this doll, it looks exactly like one I had as a child. Dorothy, pick up the photo of the girl again." She picked up the photograph with trembling hands. She looked at the child's face for a long moment, then brought her hand to her chest. "My God, that smile, that way of holding the doll. Harold, I think that girl is me." The silence that followed was profound. The two remained motionless, trying to process the devastating discovery they had just made. "If you are that girl, then you lived here as a child. And my parents abandoned me here for 3 years." Dorothy began to cry. Not a delicate cry, but a deep cry, from a pain that had been stored for decades without her knowing. "They said they would come back to get me, but they never came back." "Dorothy, calm down. Maybe they did come back, but you were already gone." "How? How did I leave? Where did I go? How did I meet my adoptive family?" The questions piled up, each bringing more confusion and pain. Dorothy sat in the old armchair, the same one she had probably spent entire nights in as a child, waiting for the parents who never returned. "I need to understand what happened to my real parents," she said, drying her tears. "Let's look for more clues here. There has to be something else." Harold rummaged through the compartments they hadn't explored yet. In a smaller drawer, he found a sealed envelope with the name Marilyn written on the front. "Dorothy, there's an envelope here with your name." "My name." "Marilyn. That was your real name, wasn't it?" Dorothy had been registered as Dorothy by the family that adopted her, but now she vaguely remembered having another name before, a name her birth mother used to whisper affectionately. "Open the envelope, Harold. I don't have the courage." Harold opened it carefully. Inside was a longer letter and a small hand-drawn map. "It's from your father," he said, beginning to read. "My dear Marilyn, if you are reading this, it means you managed to grow up and return to our secret place. Forgive me for not being able to come back to get you. Things got more complicated than we imagined." Dorothy moved closer to listen. "We were forced to leave the country. The men who were looking for us discovered our hiding place in the city and almost caught us. We tried several times to come back to get you, but the area was being watched day and night." "They tried to come back," murmured Dorothy. "We left you with the Thompson family, who promised to care for you as if you were their own daughter. They knew about this place and had instructions to bring you here if anything happened." "Thompson?" said Dorothy, surprised. "But my adoptive family was named Miller. If you are reading this alone, it means something went wrong with our plans. Marilyn, I want you to know that not a day goes by that your mother and I don't think of you. We were forced to choose between our own lives and the possibility of seeing you again. We chose to live, hoping that one day we could be reunited." Harold stopped reading, looking at his wife. "Do you want me to continue?" "Go on. I need to know everything. On the map that comes with this letter, I've marked where we are living now. It's far away in another country, but if you can find us, we will be the happiest family in the world. If you cannot, know that you were loved from the first day of your life, and that our decision to part was the hardest we ever made." Dorothy took the map with trembling hands. It was a simple drawing, but it showed a specific location in Canada. "They went to Canada," she said. "My real parents might still be alive." "This was written decades ago, Dorothy. They may have died of old age or moved again. Or they could be there waiting for me for 50 years. The possibility brought a mix of hope and terror to Dorothy's heart. All her life she had wondered about her origins. The Miller family had always been loving, but could never properly explain how she had come to them. They said she appeared lost in town when she was about 10 years old, with no memory of where she came from. "Harold, what do I do with this information?" "I don't know, my love." "Oh, my. It's a very difficult decision. If they are still alive, they must be over 90 now. This might be our last chance to be reunited." "And what if it's a disappointment? What if they don't want to see you, or have already forgotten you?" Dorothy looked around the underground space again. Now everything made sense. The vague memories of her childhood, the feeling of familiarity with that place, the cloth doll that seemed to come from a distant dream. "Harold, I have to at least try. I've spent my whole life not knowing where I came from. Now that I know, I can't just ignore it." "And how are we going to do that? We don't have money to travel to Canada, nor do we know anyone there. We have some money saved in the account, and we can sell a few things. Dorothy, think this through. We left our home 3 days ago because of our son. Now you want to go after parents who abandoned you 50 years ago. Does that make sense?" Harold's question brought Dorothy back to reality. Truly, her life had been turned upside down in a matter of days. First the fight with Stephen, then fleeing their own home, and now the discovery of her true origin. It may not make sense, but it's something I need to do. You don't understand, Harold. All my life I felt as if a part of me was missing, a hole in my chest that I could never explain. And you think finding these parents will fill that hole? I don't know. But I need to find out. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring every corner of the underground hideout. They found more personal items, simple handmade toys, and even some math exercises written by the child. "Look here," said Harold, showing a sheet of paper. "She was studying down here, learned to read and write on her own. How did I survive 3 years here? How did I not go mad from loneliness?" "You were a strong child, and smart, from what I can see in these papers." When the sun began to set, they decided to leave the hideout. The experience had been too intense for just one day. "Let's get our bags and find a place to sleep," said Harold. "Tomorrow we'll decide what to do with all this we've discovered." They climbed the stone stairs, carrying with them some of the most important letters and photographs. Dorothy also picked up the cloth doll, feeling an emotional connection to the object she hadn't experienced in decades. Harold, even if we decide not to go after my parents, this discovery has changed everything. How so? Now I understand why I always felt different, why I always struggled to feel truly at home anywhere. It wasn't my paranoia or ingratitude. I really had lost my original family. And does that change anything about what we're going through now? Dorothy thought about the question as they walked along the dry bank of the Catawba River, looking for a suitable place to spend the night. Yes, it does. It made me realize that family isn't just who shares your blood, but also who chooses to stay by your side when things get tough. Like the Miller family did for you when you were a child. Exactly, and like you're doing for me now, even though I want to go off in search of a family that might not even exist anymore. They found a small shelter built for fishermen and decided to spend the night there. It wasn't comfortable, but it was better than sleeping out in the open. As they organized their few things, Dorothy looked at the photographs they had brought from the hiding place again. "You know what impresses me the most?" she said. "What?" "How my biological parents managed to build that place. It must have taken a lot of work, a lot of planning. Yes, it wasn't something improvised. They knew they might need to hide you for a long time. And yet, they abandoned me." "Dorothy, from the letters, it doesn't seem like abandonment. It seems like desperation." "What's the difference?" "Abandonment is when you choose to get rid of someone. Desperation is when you're forced into an impossible choice." Dorothy reflected on her husband's words. Indeed, the letters showed her parents suffering, not indifference. Even so, I was a child, I needed them. And they knew that. That's why they left you with a family, not alone forever. But something went wrong with that plan. I ended up with the Miller family, not the Thompson family. What if we found out what happened to the Thompsons? Maybe they know more details about this whole story. Dorothy felt a chill in her stomach. The possibility of discovering more about her past was both fascinating and frightening. How are we going to find that family? It was 50 years ago. We can start by asking around town. Maybe there's still someone who remembers them. What if they're alive? What if they know where my biological parents are? One thing at a time, Dorothy. First, let's make sure you really are the Marilyn from these letters. How can we be sure? By looking for more evidence, talking to people who might have known your family, visiting the places mentioned in the letters. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, they decided to go to the nearest town to do some research. Dorothy was still emotionally shaken, but she was determined to discover the truth about her origins. The town of St. Bernard's Valley was small, with just over 15,000 inhabitants, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's story, especially significant events from the past. They first looked for the municipal library, hoping to find archives or old newspapers that might have news about the Bennett family or about disappearances in the region during the 1970s. "Good morning," said Dorothy to the librarian, a middle-aged lady with thick prescription glasses. "We'd like to consult old newspapers from the 1970s. We have some archived copies, but it's not a complete collection. Can I help you look for something specific?" "We're researching a family that lived in the area at that time. Bennett, Walter and Helen Bennett, with a daughter named Marilyn." The librarian seemed to think for a moment. "Bennett. I don't recall anything specific, but I'll fetch the archives for you." She brought several boxes of yellowed newspapers. Dorothy and Harold began leafing through copy after copy, looking for any mention of the Bennett family. After 2 hours of searching, Harold found something. "Dorothy, look at this." It was a small note in the local paper, dated March 1974. "Family mysteriously disappears from the area. Walter Bennett, a City Hall employee, and his wife Helen Bennett, vanished from their rural residence without a trace. The couple's daughter, Marilyn Bennett, aged 9, is also missing. Authorities are investigating the case." "Here it is," said Dorothy, feeling her heart race. "It's about my parents." "Keep looking. There must be more news in the following papers." They found 2 more articles about the case. The second, from April 1974, reported that the investigation had found no clues to the family's whereabouts. The third, from June of the same year, mentioned that the case had been closed due to lack of evidence of a crime. Closed due to lack of evidence, read Dorothy. No one knew they had fled the country. That was probably for the best. If they were being politically persecuted, it wasn't in their interest for the authorities to find out where they had gone. Dorothy got up from the library table, feeling a mix of validation and sadness. The news confirmed that she really was Marilyn Bennett, but it also showed that her family had simply vanished from everyone's lives. "Let's look for the Thompson family now," she said. "Where do we start?" "At the records office. If they lived here at the time, there should be some record." At the records office, the clerk who assisted them was an older lady who had worked there for over 40 years. "Thompson?" she said when Dorothy mentioned the surname. "There was a Thompson family that lived on Blossom Street, but they moved away a long time ago." "Do you remember when?" "Early 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. Joseph Thompson was a merchant here in town. His wife, Mrs. Margaret, was a teacher." "Did they have children?" "Yes, they did. 2 boys and a girl. But the girl wasn't their biological child. She was adopted. A child who showed up here kind of lost." Dorothy felt a shiver. "Do you know more details about that adoption?" "It wasn't an official adoption. You know how it was back then. The girl appeared in town with no family, and the Thompsons decided to take care of her. But after a few years, they moved and took her with them." "Where did they move to?" "Oh, I don't know that. It was far away because we never heard from them again." Harold and Dorothy exchanged a look. Another clue, lost in time. "But wait," the clerk continued. "The Thompsons' oldest son still lives here in the area. It's Marcus Thompson. He has a mechanic's shop at the edge of town. Would he know where his parents and adoptive sister are?" "Could be. It's worth a try." They left the records office with new hope. They had finally found a concrete clue that could lead them to more answers. The mechanic's shop was easy to find, a simple building by the roadside, with 2 cars parked in front, and the sound of tools coming from inside. "Good afternoon," Harold greeted as he entered. "We're looking for Marcus Thompson." "That's me," replied a man of about 50, coming out from under a car. "How can I help you?" Dorothy stepped forward. "We'd like to talk about your family. Specifically about a girl your parents took care of in the 1970s. Marcus's expression changed. "Helen? You knew Helen?" "I am Helen," said Dorothy, feeling emotion take over her voice. Marcus stopped what he was doing and looked at her carefully. "Helen, my little sister. But how? You disappeared so long ago." "Disappeared how?" "Dad and Mom moved to Virginia when I was 15. They took you and my brother Robert. I stayed here because I was already working and dating, but after a few years we lost contact." "Are your parents still alive?" "Dad passed away 10 years ago, but Mom is still alive. She's 84 and lives in a nursing home in Pleasant Valley." Dorothy felt her legs go weak, finally a direct connection to her past. Does she remember me?" "Yes, she does. Sometimes she talks about you, asks if we know where you are, if you started a family. She always had a special fondness for you." "And Robert? My other brother?" "Robert lives in New York City. He's married, has kids. He also always asks about you when we talk." The revelation was devastating for Dorothy. All these years, she had a family that cared about her, that missed her, but she never knew. "How did I lose you all?" she asked. Marcus wiped his hands on a cloth and sat on a nearby bench. "It's a sad story, Helen. When you moved to Virginia, you were about 15. A teenager, you know how it is. After a few years, you rebelled against our parents, said they weren't your real family and that you were going to look for your biological parents. I said that? You did, and you left home in the early hours one morning. You left a note saying you were going to find out where you came from and that you wouldn't return until you found answers." Dorothy began to remember vaguely. Flashes of memories from a rebellious adolescence, a constant feeling of not belonging to that family, unanswered questions that gnawed at her inside. And what happened after? "Dad and Mom searched for you for months. They went to the police, traveled to towns, asked everyone, but you had completely vanished. How did I end up with the Miller family then?" "We never knew. One day you just weren't anywhere we could look." Harold, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, stepped closer. "Marcus, Do you have your mother's address or phone number? Yes, I do. Are you going to visit her? If she'll receive us, said Dorothy. She'll want to, I'm sure of it. She's been praying for news of you for years. Marcus wrote down the address and phone number of the nursing home in Pleasant Valley, and also the contact details for his brother Robert in New York City. Helen, he said before they left, I want you to know that you were always part of our family. Blood doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you came from. Dad and Mom loved you as a daughter, and we love you as a sister. Dorothy couldn't hold back the tears. I'm so sorry for leaving like that. I was young and confused. You were a teenager who wanted to find her roots. That's normal. What's important is that now we can reconnect. Leaving the workshop, Dorothy was emotionally exhausted. In 2 days, she had discovered her biological origin, her adoptive family, and begun piecing together a story that had been fragmented for decades. Harold, all this feels like a crazy dream. Or a miracle. How many people get the chance to rediscover their own past like this? But now what? What do we do with all this information? What do you want to do? Dorothy stopped in the middle of the road and looked at her husband. I want to visit Mrs. Margaret first. I need to talk to her to better understand what happened during the years I lived with her and her husband. And then? Then I want to meet Robert, my brother. And then... So I want to decide whether or not to go after my biological parents in Canada. Are you sure you're ready for all this? I'm not sure of anything, Harold, but I know I need to do these things to be able to move forward with my life. They decided to go to Pleasant Valley the next day. They spent the night at a small boarding house in the city, and Dorothy called the nursing home to schedule the visit. Hello, good evening. I'd like to schedule a visit for Mrs. Margaret Thompson. Is she a relative of yours? Asked the employee on the other end of the line. I'm a daughter she cared for when I was a child. Oh, how wonderful. Mrs. Margaret always says she has a lost daughter. What's your name? Marilyn. She knows me as Marilyn. Marilyn, she will be so happy. You can come tomorrow morning from 9 o'clock. Dorothy hung up the phone with her heart racing. Finding Mrs. Margaret would be like going back in time, like finding a part of herself that had been lost for decades. Did you manage to schedule it? Asked Harold. I did. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning. And how are you feeling? Nervous. What if she doesn't recognize me? What if she has memory problems because of her age? What if she's perfectly lucid and remembers everything? What if she's happy to see you? That makes me nervous too. They ate dinner in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Harold reflected on how their lives had completely changed in a matter of days. First the fight with their son, then running away from home, and now the discovery of Dorothy's entire hidden past. Harold, she said, breaking the silence. Yes? Thank you for being with me through all this. We've been married for 48 years. If I can't be with you during the most important moments of your life, then what's the point of our marriage? But this isn't a normal situation. Many men would be bothered by their wife wanting to reconnect with her biological family. I'm not many men. I'm your husband, and everything that's important to you is important to me too. The next morning they took a bus to Pleasant Valley. The trip lasted 2 hours, and Dorothy spent the whole time looking out the window, trying to imagine what the reunion would be like. The St. Francis Nursing Home was a well-kept place, with beautiful gardens and a welcoming atmosphere. The employee who greeted them was young and friendly. Have you come to visit Mrs. Margaret? Yes, I'm Marilyn, said Dorothy. She's in the garden. She loves being there in the morning. I'll let her know you've arrived. A few minutes later, an 84-year-old lady approached, walking slowly with the aid of a cane. She wore a light blue dress and had completely white hair tied in a bun. When she saw Dorothy, she stopped and observed her for a long moment. Marilyn? She said, her voice trembling. My Marilyn. It's me, Mother Margaret. The lady set her cane aside and opened her arms. Dorothy ran to hug her, and the two stayed like that for several minutes, crying and embracing in the middle of the garden. My daughter, my dear daughter, Mrs. Margaret repeated. I knew you'd come back one day. I always knew. Forgive me, Mother. Forgive me for leaving like that. There's nothing to forgive, daughter. You were young and needed to find answers. I understood, even though it hurt. Harold kept a respectful distance, moved to witness the reunion. They sat on a bench in the garden, and Dorothy began to tell everything she had discovered in the last few days. "So you found the place where your parents hid you?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "I did, and I found the letters they left. I always knew there was some dramatic story behind your disappearance. A child doesn't just vanish into thin air. Did you know about my biological parents?" "I knew a little. When you appeared in our town, you were very frightened and confused. She spoke of a dark place where she lived, of parents who had gone away, but it was all very confusing, like childhood memories. How did you decide to adopt me?" "It wasn't a difficult decision. You were a beautiful, intelligent girl, but you were completely lost. My husband and I talked and decided you would be part of our family." "And how did I appear in town?" "That to this day is a mystery. A truck driver brought you, said he found you walking alone on the road crying. You couldn't say where you came from, only that you were looking for a family that had left you somewhere." Dorothy tried to remember that period, but the memories remained fragmented. "And what was our life together like?" "They were very happy years, Marilyn. You adapted well to the family, got along with the boys, were a loving and obedient daughter. I did well in school, helped around the house, were a normal child." "Then why did I want to leave as a teenager?" Mrs. Margaret sighed. "You started asking questions about your origin. You wanted to understand why you didn't look like us physically, why you had confusing memories of a previous life, and we couldn't give satisfactory answers. Did you try to investigate my past?" "Yes, we tried. We went to the police, asked many people, but we never managed to discover where you had come from. It was as if you had appeared out of nowhere." "And when did I leave?" "It was in the early morning of 1987. You were 17. You left a note saying you were going to look for your real family and would only return when you found answers." Dorothy vaguely remembered that night, the feeling of not belonging, the urgent need to discover who she really was, the teenage rebellion mixed with a deep pain she couldn't explain. "And did you look for me?" "We looked for years, dear. Joseph even hired a private investigator. We traveled to dozens of cities, put up posters, spoke with newspapers. But you had simply disappeared. How did I end up with the Miller family then? That we never found out. It was only many years later that we learned by chance that you were living in a small town with another family. But when we tried to get in touch, you had already married and started your own family. We didn't want to interfere in your new life." The revelation was like a punch to Dorothy's stomach. "You knew where I was and didn't get in touch. We thought it was for the best, dear. You had chosen a new life, even a new name. We didn't want to stir up your past if you were happy. But I never stopped wondering about you. I never stopped feeling that something was missing in my life. Forgive our decision, Marilyn. Perhaps we were wrong, but we did what we thought was best for you." The two remained silent for a few minutes, each processing the revelations and the feelings that emerged. "Mother Margaret," Dorothy said finally. "Yes, dear." "Do you remember if my biological parents tried to contact me during the years I lived with you?" "Not directly, but there were some strange things that might make sense now." "What things?" "For a few years, always around your birthday, a person would appear in town asking about a girl named Marilyn Bennett. We never managed to speak with this person. They always disappeared before we could reach them." "Were they my parents?" "It could be. Perhaps they were trying to find you, but afraid to expose themselves." "And then they stopped appearing?" "Yes. After about 5 years, no one ever asked about you in town again." Dorothy felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Her biological parents had in some way tried to find her, but for some reason they gave up or were prevented from continuing the search. "Dear," said Mrs. Margaret, taking Dorothy's hands in hers, "what do you intend to do now with all this information?" "I don't know. I'm thinking of trying to find my biological parents. I have an address in Canada. And is it worth reopening that wound after so long?" "That wound never healed, Mrs. Margaret. It was always open. I just didn't know why." "What if it's a disappointment? What if it's not? What if they are still alive and waiting for me?" The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of lunchtime at the nursing home. Mrs. Margaret invited Dorothy and Harold to have lunch with her. During the meal, she shared more details about the time Dorothy lived with the Thompson family. Stories of Christmas, birthdays, first days of school, childhood mischief. "You were a very affectionate girl," she recalled, "always eager to please, always wanting to help. But there was also a sadness in your eyes that we could never completely erase." "Sadness?" "Yes, as if you were always waiting for someone who never arrived." The observation touched Dorothy's heart deeply. Indeed, throughout her life she had felt as if she were waiting for something or someone, without knowing exactly what. "Mrs. Margaret, do you have any photos from that time?" "I have a few in my room. I'll get them." She returned with a small box of photographs. Among them were several pictures of Dorothy as a child and teenager with the Thompson family. "Look at you here at 8 years old," said Mrs. Margaret, showing a photo. "You were helping to make cookies for Christmas." Dorothy saw herself in the photo smiling, but Mrs. Margaret was right. There was a melancholy in the child's eyes that was noticeable even in the photograph. "And here you are at 15, on your birthday." In this photo, Dorothy was older, almost a young woman. The smile was still there, but the sadness in her eyes had intensified. "It was shortly after this photo that you started asking more questions about your origins," recalled Mrs. Margaret. "And here, this was the last photo we have of you." It was a photo of Dorothy at 16, a few months before she ran away. She looked serious, staring at the camera with an expression of determination and defiance. "You had already decided to leave when this photo was taken," observed Mrs. Margaret. "We could tell you were mentally saying goodbye to us." Dorothy studied the photo for a long time. It was strange to see herself at a time in her life she only partially remembered. "May I keep some of these photos?" she asked. "You may keep them all, my dear. I've kept them all these years hoping I could return them to you one day." By late afternoon, it was time to say goodbye. Dorothy promised to keep in touch and visit her regularly. "One thing before you go," said Mrs. Margaret. "When you find your biological parents, if you do find them, remember one thing. Family isn't just who gave birth to you. Family is also who raised you, who loved you, who stood by your side when you needed it. I know, Mrs. Margaret, and you will always be my family. And you will always be my daughter. No matter how many parents you have, there will always be a place for you in my life." The reunion with Mrs. Margaret had been emotionally intense, but also enlightening. Dorothy now understood her own story better, her teenage motivations, and the confused feelings that had accompanied her throughout her life. On the trip back, she and Harold talked about the next steps. "Now I want to talk to Robert, my brother," she said. "And then?" "Then I'll decide about Canada." "Are you more inclined to go or to stay?" "Every conversation I have makes me more convinced that I need to close this circle. I need to at least try to find my biological parents. Even knowing it could be a disappointment. Even knowing. My whole life has been marked by this open wound. Maybe it's time to heal it, for better or for worse." When they arrived back in the city, Dorothy called the number Marcus had given for his brother Robert. "Hello," answered a male voice. "Robert, it's Marilyn, your sister." The silence on the other end of the line lasted a few seconds. "Marilyn? My little sister, Marilyn?" "It's me." "My God, I can't believe it. Where have you been all these years? We've been looking for you for decades." "It's a long story, Robert. Can I tell you in person?" "Of course. Where are you? I can come meet you." They arranged to meet the next day in a town halfway between where Dorothy was and New York City. The reunion with Robert was equally emotional. He had become a middle-aged man, married, with 2 teenage children, but he still held traces of the boy Dorothy vaguely remembered. "You haven't changed all that much," he said, hugging his sister. "You still have that same somewhat melancholy way about you from when you were a child." "And you still have that same mischievous smile," she replied. Robert told details about the family's search for her during the years after her disappearance. "Dad never came to terms with you being gone," he said. "He spent all the family's savings trying to find you. Mom cried every day, blaming herself for not having been able to explain better about your origin. And you? How did you deal with my leaving?" I was only 2 years younger than you. I was 15. I was angry. I thought you had been selfish, that you didn't value the family we had. And today I understand you were dealing with issues that were bigger than you. A teenager doesn't have the maturity to process that kind of situation alone. Robert also had photos from the time they lived together. He showed pictures of them playing in the backyard, birthday parties, family trips. "Remember this one?" he said, showing a photo of the two of them in costume for a harvest festival. "You insisted you wanted to be a country girl just like me." Dorothy smiled, feeling a wave of nostalgia. "I vaguely remember. I have some memories from that time that are like distant dreams. And remember the time we ran off to the river and Dad was desperate looking for us?" "I don't remember." "You said you wanted to find where you had come from by following the river. You were about 12. Even back then you were obsessed with discovering your origin." The information made Dorothy reflect. Apparently, her need to find answers about the past hadn't arisen in adolescence but had been there since childhood. "Robert, do you remember if our parents knew anything more about my story? Something they didn't tell you?" "I think so. Several times I heard Mom and Dad talking quietly about you. It seemed like they knew things they didn't want to share with us." "What kind of things?" "I'm not sure. But once I heard Mom tell Dad about a dangerous place you had come from, and that maybe it was better if you never remembered completely." "A dangerous place." Those were the words she used. It could be that they knew about your biological parents and the circumstances of your disappearance. "And they never brought it up again?" "Not in front of me. But after you left, several times I heard them talking about trying to contact those people to see if you had shown up there." "What people?" "I don't know. It could have been your biological parents or someone connected to them." The conversation with Robert brought new pieces to the puzzle of Dorothy's life. Apparently, the Thompsons knew more about her origin than they had revealed, and possibly maintained some kind of indirect contact with people from her past. "Robert," she said before they said goodbye, "if I go looking for my biological parents, would you support me?" "I'd support you in anything, Marilyn. You're my sister, no matter where you came from or where you're going." "And what if I can't find them, or if they don't want to see me?" "So you return home to be near those who love you. Life doesn't end because one dream doesn't come true." "Home? Where is home for me now? Home is where you have family, and you have family here with us. You have family with Mrs. Margaret, and you have family with Harold. You are a person very rich in emotional bonds, you just don't realize it." Her brother's words brought an unexpected comfort to Dorothy. Truly, throughout her search for the past, she had rediscovered family ties she thought were lost forever. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we are just starting out. Now continuing. That night back at the hotel, Dorothy and Harold had a definitive conversation about the future. "Harold, I've made a decision." "What is it?" "I'm going to Canada to look for my biological parents." "Are you sure?" "I am. After everything I've discovered, after all the people I've reconnected with, I understood that this search isn't about abandoning the families I have. It's about becoming a complete person. And if it doesn't work out, at least I'll know I tried, and I'll be able to move forward without the feeling that something was left undone. Then we are going to Canada." "We? You didn't think you were going to make this trip alone, did you?" Dorothy smiled, feeling immense gratitude for the husband who supported her unconditionally. "And our problem with Stephen, and the sale of the farm?" "Stephen can wait. This here is more important. But what if we return, and the farm has already been sold? Then we start a new life somewhere else. At 75, it's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world either. You would really be willing to start all over again for my sake?" "Dorothy, after 48 years of marriage, haven't you understood yet that my life is completely tied to yours? If you need to go to Canada, then we are going to Canada." The trip was planned for the following week. They needed to organize documents, exchange money, and do some basic research about the Canadian town mentioned on the map found in the hiding place. The town was called Kingston, and it was near the capital, Toronto. According to the information they could gather, it was a small town with about 20,000 inhabitants. "If they are still alive and living there, it shouldn't be hard to find them in a town that size," said Harold. "And if they've already died, and if they moved, and if they don't want to see me. And what if they are there, waiting for you for 50 years? The bus trip to Toronto took almost a full day. Dorothy spent most of the time looking out the window, watching the landscape gradually change as they moved away from the United States and entered Canada. "I'm nervous," she confessed as they neared their destination. "It's normal. You're about to reunite with parents you haven't seen for 50 years. If they are there, if they are really my parents, if they want to see me." "Dorothy, stop thinking about the worst-case scenario. Think about the best one. What would the best-case scenario be? They are alive, healthy, living in the same house for decades, waiting for you, and they will welcome you with open arms. And the worst? Let's not think about the worst." They arrived in Toronto in the late afternoon and caught a local bus to Kingston. The town was small and cozy, with quiet streets and a countryside air that reminded them of many American towns. They checked into a small inn in the center and planned to start their search the next morning. "How are we going to look for them?" asked Dorothy. "First, we'll go to the town hall, see if they have any records. Then we ask people on the street. In a small town, everyone knows everyone. And if someone asks why we are looking, we tell the truth. A daughter looking for her parents after 50 years of separation." The next morning, they started at the town hall. The employee who assisted them was friendly and helpful. "Bennett? Walter and Helen Bennett?" he repeated, thoughtful. "The last name is common, but I'll check our records." He typed on the computer for a few minutes. "I have a Walter Bennett here who lives on Acacia Street, number 47, but I don't know if he's the person you're looking for." "How long has he lived at that address?" asked Harold. "Since 1975, according to our records." Dorothy felt her heart race. The date matched the time when her parents would have fled the United States. "May we have the address?" "Of course. Acacia Street is about a 10-minute walk from here." Leaving the city hall, Dorothy was visibly nervous. What if it's really them? Then you'll be reunited with your parents. And if it's not? Then we'll keep looking. Acacia Street was a quiet street with small, well-kept houses. Number 47 was a simple house, painted white, with a small garden in front. "This is it," said Harold, stopping in front of the house. Dorothy looked at the building. There was something familiar about that house, as if she had been there before, or as if she had dreamed of that place. "I'll knock on the door," she said, taking a deep breath. "Do you want me to go with you?" "No. This is something I need to do alone." Dorothy walked to the front door and knocked 3 times gently. She heard footsteps coming from inside the house, and then the door opened. A lady with completely white hair appeared. She must have been about 90 years old, but she still stood without assistance. When she saw Dorothy, she stopped and looked at her carefully. "Can I help you?" asked the lady with an accent that mixed American English with Canadian Spanish. "Are you Helen Bennett?" "Yes, I am." "Why do you ask?" Dorothy felt her legs tremble. It was her. It was her biological mother. "I'm Marilyn, your daughter." Helen stood motionless for several seconds, looking at Dorothy as if she were seeing a ghost. "Marilyn?" she whispered. "My Marilyn?" "It's me, Mom." Helen dropped the towel she was holding in her hands and brought both hands to her face. "My God. My God. You came back. You grew up. You're well." "I am, Mom." "Come in, daughter. Come in quickly. Your father is in the back working in the garden. Walter, Walter, come quickly. Our daughter has returned." The house was simple but cozy. Old furniture, the smell of home-cooked food, photographs on the walls. And in one of those photographs, Dorothy saw herself as a child, the same photo she had found in the underground hiding place. "You kept my photo," she said, moved. "We kept everything, daughter. Everything that reminded us of you." Heavy footsteps came from the back of the house, and an elderly man appeared. He was nearly 90, stooped with age, but his eyes were still lively and alert. When he saw Dorothy, he stopped in the middle of the room. "Marilyn?" he said, his voice choked. "Hi, Dad." Walter began to cry, a deep cry of decades of repressed longing and guilt. "Forgive, daughter. Forgive your old father for abandoning you." "You didn't abandon me. You did what you could to protect me." "But we left you alone, a small child alone in that place." "I wasn't alone. I was cared for by good people." The three of them hugged in the middle of the room, crying and laughing at the same time, 50 years of separation coming to an end at that moment. "Tell us," said Helen when they sat on the sofa. "Tell us everything that happened to you all these years." Dorothy told her story from the moment she was found by the truck driver on the road to the reunion with the Thompson family and the discovery of the underground hiding place. "The hiding place still exists?" asked Walter. "It still exists, and all the letters you left are there." "We came back to get you," said Helen. "Several times. But there was always someone watching the area. It was too dangerous. And when we managed to return without being noticed, you were no longer there," continued Walter. "The hiding place was empty. We thought you had been found by the authorities. We searched for you for years. We hired people to help us. We sent letters to various cities in the United States. But you had vanished completely." "And how did you end up here in Canada?" "We had contacts here," explained Walter. "People who were in the same situation as us, political refugees who had to leave the United States." "You were political refugees?" "Your father worked at City Hall," said Helen. "He had access to documents that showed corruption among local officials. When he tried to expose it, he discovered the scheme was bigger than he imagined." "It involved high-ranking military officers," continued Walter. "When they realized I knew too much, they began to hunt us." "Is that why you hid me in the underground place?" "Exactly. We knew they would come after us, but we hoped they wouldn't bother with a child. Our idea was to hide for a few weeks, let the situation cool down, and then come back to get you. But it didn't work." "It didn't. The pursuit was more intense than we imagined. We had to flee the country or we would have been arrested or worse." Helen took Dorothy's hands in hers. "My child, not a day of my life goes by that I don't think about the terrible decision we had to make, choosing between our lives and leaving you alone. You chose right. If you had stayed, you might have been arrested and I would have truly been orphaned. But you grew up thinking we had abandoned you. That must have marked your whole life." "It did. But now I understand you did the best you could in an impossible situation." Walter stood up and brought over a shoebox full of papers. "Look here, my child. These are all the letters we wrote to you over these years, but could never send." Dorothy looked at the box. There must have been hundreds of letters. "You wrote letters to me for 50 years. Every year on your birthday, every Christmas, every Children's Day. We wrote as if you would read them, as if one day we would be reunited. And you kept believing that would happen?" "Your mother never lost hope," said Walter. "I sometimes got discouraged, thought you would never forgive us, or that maybe you didn't even remember us anymore. But Helen always said you would come back. How were you so sure?" "A mother feels these things, my child. I knew you were alive, I knew you were well, and I knew that one day you would come looking for us." Dorothy spent the rest of the day listening to her parents' stories, learning about the life they had built in Canada, and telling them about her own family. "Do you have a husband?" asked Helen. "I do. Harold. He's staying at an inn here in town, waiting for me to find the courage to introduce him to you. Why didn't you bring him here? I thought it would be better for us to meet first, just the three of us." "Go get him now," said Walter. "I want to meet the man who has cared for my daughter all these years." "And children? Do you have children?" asked Helen. "We had 3 children. 2 are already adults, married with their own children. The youngest still lives with us." "Grandchildren!" exclaimed Helen. "I have grandchildren." "And great-grandchildren too. The boys have small children." Helen began to cry with joy. "Walter, are you hearing this? We have a family, a big family." Dorothy went to fetch Harold from the inn. He was anxious to know how the meeting had gone. "So, is it them?" "It's them, Harold. They are my parents." "And how was it?" "Emotional, difficult, comforting, all at the same time." "Did they welcome you well?" "Very well. And they want to meet you." The first meeting between Harold and his in-laws was a little awkward, but soon everyone felt at ease. Walter and Helen were impressed by Harold's dedication to their daughter. "Thank you for taking care of our Marilyn all these years," said Walter, shaking his son-in-law's hand. "Who took care of whom?" "We took care of each other," replied Harold. "She gave me as much as I gave her." They spent 3 days in Kingston, talking, getting to know Dorothy's parents' routine, and planning the future. "Are you going back to the United States?" asked Helen. "We are. Our life is there." "And will you come visit us?" "Of course, and you can come visit us too." "At this age, long trips are complicated," said Walter. "Then we'll come several times a year." "Promise?" "I promise, Mom." At the time of the farewell, everyone was emotional again. "Daughter," said Helen, handing a package to Dorothy, "these are the letters we wrote to you all these years. Now they can finally reach their recipient." "And this," said Walter, handing over a small wooden box. "It's a ring I bought for you when you turned 10. I kept it, waiting for the day to give it to you." Dorothy opened the little box. It was a simple ring with a small stone, but made with a father's love. "It's beautiful, Dad. It might not fit anymore. You've grown. I'll have it adjusted. I'll wear it always." On the trip back to the United States, Dorothy was visibly different. A peace she had never felt before hovered over her face. "How are you feeling?" asked Harold. "Complete. For the first time in my life, I feel like a complete person. Was this whole search worth it? Every second. Now I can move forward knowing where I come from, who my parents are, and that I was loved all along. And what are we going to do when we get home? We're going to face the situation with Stephen, talk about the farm, resolve our family problems. Are you more prepared for that now?" "Much more. Discovering my story gave me a different perspective on family, on forgiveness, on new beginnings." "How so?" "My birth parents had to make difficult choices. The Thompson family did too. I myself made difficult choices as a teenager. Stephen is also making difficult choices now, trying to take care of us the way he thinks is right. Will you forgive him for wanting to sell the farm?" "I will talk to him. I will try to understand his motivations, and we will find a solution that works for everyone. And if we can't, then we will adapt. I learned that life is full of changes, some chosen, others imposed. The important thing is to have people by your side to face those changes." When they arrived back in their town, the first thing they did was look for Stephen. He was surprised to see them. "Dad, Mom, where were you? I was worried." "We were resolving some issues from the past," said Dorothy calmly. "What issues?" "It's a long story, son. But the important thing is that we are back now, and we want to talk about the farm situation. The conversation about that is over. The property is going to be sold because you two are no longer able to take care of it alone." "Stephen," said Harold, firmly but without aggression, "you made this decision thinking of our well-being. We understand that." "Exactly. And I stand by my position. But you didn't consult us. You didn't ask what we wanted. Because you are stubborn and won't admit you need help." Dorothy approached her son. "Stephen, during this past week away, I learned a lot about family, about difficult choices, about respect. I want you to listen to a proposal." "What proposal?" "Instead of selling the farm, what if we transform it into a place where the whole family can live? You, your wife, your children, us, your siblings when they want to visit." "How so?" "Build another house on the property, share the responsibilities, create a family project where everyone contributes what they can." Stephen seemed to think about the idea, but that would be a lot of work. And is a lot of work a problem when it's divided among several people? And the investment to build another house? "We used the money you were going to earn from selling the farm to make the necessary renovations and constructions." Harold joined the conversation. "Son, your mother is right. Instead of separating, let's unite. Instead of ending the family's history on this land, let's write a new chapter. And if it doesn't work?" "And if it does?" retorted Dorothy. "And if we manage to create something beautiful together?" The conversation lasted several hours. Stephen resisted initially, but gradually became convinced that the proposal had merit. "I'll think about it," he finally said. "That's all we ask," replied Dorothy. A week later, Stephen returned with an answer. I spoke with my wife and my children. They all like the idea. We'll try to make this family project work. Are you sure? I am, but with a few conditions. What are they? You will accept help when you need it. You won't overexert yourselves just to prove you're still young. Agreed, said Harold, and I will coordinate the administrative part of the farm. Accounts, taxes, sales, those things. Also agreed, said Dorothy. And when you get older and truly can no longer take care of yourselves, you will accept the care we offer. Son, we've always accepted that. The problem is when someone decides for us without asking. Stephen smiled. I get the message, Mom. In the months that followed, the family worked together to transform the farm into a place where everyone could live comfortably. A second house was built, the common areas were renovated, and a small infrastructure was created to receive visitors. Dorothy kept the promise made to her parents and began visiting them in Canada every 4 months. Sometimes she took Harold, sometimes she went alone, sometimes she took one of the children or grandchildren. How are your parents? Mrs. Margaret always asked when Dorothy visited her at the nursing home. Well, aging, but well, and they always ask about you. Give them my regards. I will, and they send theirs back. 1 year after the reunion, Dorothy decided to write a book telling her whole story, not to publish, but to leave it recorded for her children and grandchildren. Why are you writing this? Asked Harold. So that our descendants understand the importance of not giving up on dreams, even when they seem impossible. And what is the lesson of your story? That family isn't just blood. It's choice, it's love, it's presence. That forgiving is liberating, that it's never too late to start over, and that some wounds only heal when you have the courage to look at them head on. And do you feel healed now? I feel whole. The wound has healed, but the scar remains to remind me of everything I've lived, everything I've learned, all the people who were part of my journey. Would you change anything if you could go back in time? No. Every mistake, every difficult choice, every moment of pain was necessary to bring me to where I am today. Even the 3 years you spent alone as a child, even those, they taught me to be strong, to be independent, to value every moment of affection I receive. And what would you say to someone going through a similar situation? That it's worth looking for answers, that it's worth facing the fear of the unknown, that it's worth forgiving, and that we should never ever give up on love. 2 years after the reunion, Helen Bennett passed away in her sleep at 92. Dorothy was by her side in the hospital when it happened. Thank you for coming back to me, daughter, were Helen's last words. Thank you for never giving up on finding me, Mum. The funeral was small, but full of love. The entire family of Dorothy was present, several Canadian neighbors who had grown fond of the Bennett couple, and even Robert, the adoptive brother who had come from the United States especially to say goodbye. Your mother died happy, Walter said to Dorothy. After you returned, she said she could leave in peace. And you? How are you dealing with her absence? With longing, but without regrets. We had a difficult life, but we had a life together. And in the end, we got to see you grown, married, with children. Helen died knowing you were well. Dorothy decided that Walter could not stay alone in Canada. She brought her father to live on the family farm in the United States. Are you sure you want to leave the place where you've lived for 50 years? She asked. Daughter, no place matters when you no longer have anyone to share the memories with. I want to spend my last years near you and my grandchildren. Walter's adaptation to the United States was surprisingly easy. He got along well with Harold, loved meeting his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and even helped Stephen with some projects on the farm. Your father has incredible energy for his age, Harold commented. I think it's the joy of being with family after so long. And how are you dealing with him living here? Well, it's strange to have a father after 70-some years, but it's good. It's as if a part of me that was always missing has finally clicked into place. Walter lived another 3 years on the family farm. He died at 95, surrounded by his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. His last words were for Dorothy. Thank you for forgiving me, daughter. Thank you for never giving up on me, Dad. After the passing of her biological parents, Dorothy entered a phase of deep reflection about her life, her journey. and the meaning of everything she had lived through. "You know what impresses me most about my story," she said to Harold one Sunday afternoon. "What?" "How every person who passed through my life contributed to shaping me as a person. My biological parents gave me life and taught me about sacrifice. The Thompson family taught me about unconditional love. Mrs. Margaret taught me about forgiveness. You taught me about companionship. Our children taught me about responsibility, and my grandchildren are teaching me about renewal." "And what did you teach all those people?" "Perhaps that it's worth not giving up on dreams, that it's worth searching for answers, that it's worth forgiving and starting over." "Do you regret anything?" "I regret taking so long to forgive. I regret spending years being angry at people who did the best they could in a difficult situation. I regret not appreciating sooner some people who were by my side." "Like who?" "Like you. It took me years to realize that my happiness didn't depend on discovering my past, but on valuing my present. And now? Now I know I am a lucky woman. I've had several families, several opportunities to love and be loved, several chances to start over. And if you could give advice to someone who is lost in life, I would say life is like a giant puzzle. Sometimes you spend a long time looking for one specific piece, thinking that without it, the puzzle will never be complete. But when you finally find that piece, you realize the puzzle was already beautiful even with that empty space. Deep. The search for my roots was important, but what truly completed me was learning to value every piece of my story, even the painful pieces. And what is your plan for the future? To keep living one day at a time, to take care of our family, to regularly visit my parents' graves in Canada, to stay in touch with the Thompson family, and to be present for our grandchildren in a way our grandparents couldn't be for us. Sounds like a good plan. It's a simple plan, but it's mine. That same year, Dorothy had one last surprise in store from fate. She received a phone call from an unknown woman. "Hello, are you Marilyn Bennett?" asked the voice on the other end of the line. "I'm Dorothy Bennett, but I was Marilyn as a child. Why do you ask?" "I'm Ellen Bennett, daughter of Walter and Helen Bennett." Dorothy nearly dropped the phone. What do you mean?" "My parents only had one daughter. Me." "No, Mum. They had two daughters. I was born after you fled to Canada." "That's impossible. I know it's hard to believe. Can I come there to talk to you in person?" "Where do you live?" "In Toronto. I'm a teacher here. I always knew of your existence, but I never knew how to find you until now." "How did you discover where I was?" "Through our parents' neighbors. They gave me your address in the United States." Dorothy arranged to meet Ellen in Canada the following week. When they saw each other, the physical resemblance was striking. Ellen was 50 years old and truly looked like Dorothy's sister. "Our parents never told me about you," said Dorothy. "They didn't tell me about you either. I only discovered your existence when Dad was dying and started talking about the first Marilyn." "First Marilyn?" "That's how he referred to you. He said he had a daughter before me, also named Marilyn, who had stayed in the United States. Why did they hide this from both of us?" "I think it was too painful for them. Perhaps they thought it was better for each of us to grow up without knowing of the other's existence." "And how do you feel knowing you have a sister?" "Curious, eager to get to know you better, a little resentful for having lost 50 years of companionship. And I feel the same way." Ellen told her about her life in Canada, about how she had been raised by the parents Dorothy had just reunited with, about the financial difficulties the family faced for years. "They always lived very simply," Ellen recounted. "Dad worked as a gardener. Mom took in sewing. We never had much money, but there was never a lack of love at home." "Were they happy?" "Yes, but there was always a sadness in the depths of their eyes, as if there was a part of their life that was missing. That part was me. It was you. It was... And I grew up feeling there was something about our family they weren't telling me. How did you discover the truth?" "In a drawer of Dad's dresser, I found old letters, photos, documents, everything about you. Then I confronted them, and Mom ended up telling me the whole story." "What did you feel when you found out?" "Anger first. Anger at having been kept in the dark my whole life. Then sadness, for having lost the chance to know my older sister. And finally, curiosity. And now I want to build a relationship with you, if you want to as well. Of course I do. The two sisters spent a week together in Canada, getting to know each other, visiting the places where their parents had lived, and building a relationship that should have started 50 years earlier. It's strange to discover you have an even bigger family than you imagined, Dorothy commented. It is. But it's good too. It means our parents managed to rebuild their lives after everything they went through. Ellen, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you have children? I do. 2 grown children and 3 grandchildren. That means I have nephews and grandnephews I didn't know about. And they have an aunt they didn't know existed. Dorothy returned to the United States with yet another family to integrate into her life. She began exchanging regular letters with Ellen, and they planned to meet every 6 months, alternating between the United States and Canada. My life is getting more and more complicated, she joked with Harold. Now I have family spread across 2 countries. Complicated or rich? Rich. Definitely rich. The discovery of Ellen was the final piece of Dorothy's life puzzle. Now she knew not only where she had come from, but also had a full understanding of the family she had left behind. You know what moves me the most? She said to Ellen during one of their conversations. What? Our parents managed to be happy even after everything they went through. They managed to rebuild their lives, have more children, form a new family. And does that bother you? On the contrary, it makes me glad. It means their decision to leave me in the United States was not in vain. They managed to enjoy the life they saved by making that sacrifice. You really don't hold any resentment? I don't. I've learned that resentment is a weight that only hurts the one who carries it. They did what they thought was right in an impossible situation. And if you could go back in time and change something, I would change only one thing. I wish they had told me about you when we reunited. We lost 3 years we could have spent together. But perhaps they thought it would be too much for you to process all at once. That's possible, and perhaps they were right. In the years that followed, Dorothy dedicated herself to keeping together all the families she had discovered along her journey. She organized annual gatherings where the adopted children of the Thompsons, the descendants of her biological parents, her own American family, and even some Canadian friends who had known her parents would meet. You've become a sort of matriarch of a very large, scattered family, observed Stephen. It wasn't my intention, but that's what happened. And what's it like managing all this? Hard work, but rewarding. It's like tending a very large garden. It requires dedication, but it produces beautiful fruits. What fruits? Seeing people who didn't know each other become friends, seeing distant cousins playing together, seeing stories being told from generation to generation, seeing love multiply. Do you have any regrets? Just one, not starting this search sooner. I lost years holding on to hurt when I could have been building bridges. But perhaps you weren't ready before. That's true. Perhaps I needed to live everything I lived to be mature enough to handle so many revelations. And what is the final lesson of all this? That family is the most important thing there is. Not the perfect family from fairy tales, but the real family, with its flaws, its pains, its secrets. That it's worth fighting for these relationships, worth forgiving, worth starting over. And for someone who is going through family problems, I would say don't give up. That people change, circumstances change, feelings can be healed, that an honest conversation can resolve decades of misunderstanding, and that it's never too late to reach out and ask for or offer forgiveness. Deep, Mom. That's 70-some years of life, son. Age has to be good for something, right? End of story. Now, tell me what you thought of this story and where you're following us from. Did Dorothy make the right decisions in pursuing her origins? Would you do the same in a similar situation? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. Thanks for the company, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.